Hello! So this is a project I've been working on for a while, and I'm pretty pleased with the progress I've been making, so I felt it was a good time to show you what I've made. This is an open source web framework and web server all in one, and if you've ever written a Flask application, the format will be very familiar to you. So like I said, this is all open source, so the code is available for download on GitHub. I will put a link in the description. But if you'd like a more in-depth look on how I actually made these things and how it all works, then I have filmed tutorials of everything that I've made here, so feel free to browse the channel for that. So let's take a look at this file. This is the file that web developers are going to be interested in. This is where you are actually creating your website. And you could split this up into multiple files if you want to segregate different portions of different apps that are all under one website. But for now, let's just use this one file. I first have a single include statement, and this single include is going to give you everything you need to build the website. Afterwards, you are going to create a few functions, and these are going to be the routes of your web page. So in this case, I have a home page and an about page. Each function needs to return a character pointer, and they take these two custom objects as their arguments. You don't need to worry too much about these objects. It's useful to know how they work so that you can utilize them to their fullest potential, but if you don't, then it's fine. What you really want to worry about is what happens within the function, and this is where you have your route do whatever it needs to do. So you could connect to a database, you could perform some calculations, whatever it is you need doing. All that is required is that at the end, you return a string. In my case, I'm using this render template function to generate a string, and this gives me a very primitive way of using HTML templates. It takes a variable number of arguments, each one being the path to a certain file, and then it just sticks the contents of those files together to be written to the client. So I've defined a home page and an about page. Once I have defined all of my routes, I then create my main function. Here I instantiate an HTTP server object using this noArgument constructor. I then say register routes to the server, specifying the URL for each of the routes I define, and then I say server.launch. So it's pretty easy to actually get something up and running. So if I run this, it might take a second to actually get ready, but if I come over here, there it is, Homodeus. So this is my home page. And if I do /about, there's the about page. So it's working pretty well. Now this is in very early alpha development, so it's highly sensitive. If I put a URL that doesn't exist yet, then it will just crash. And oftentimes a browser is going to send multiple requests all at once, or concurrently that is. So if I have a CSS file on my homepage, then after the browser gets that home page, it'll make a secondary request for the CSS file. And if I have not defined a route for that CSS file, then the thing crashes. So obviously that's not good. So we have a lot of work to do yet. But so far, this interface is very pleasing to me. So I'm happy with where we are. I'm not going to go too in depth with what is going on under the hood here, but I do want to point out the sort of tangential project that is working concurrently with the web server project. And that is the library. This is an open source library of tools. So in order to build this, I've needed numerous data structures, I've needed different networking components and some system components for threads and thread pools. And instead of developing those specifically for this project, I have decided to make them applicable to the general use case. So anytime you need a linked list or a queue or a dictionary or a binary search tree, the objects I've created here will work for any kind of data. And you don't even need to worry about what type of data you're putting in. You just give it the data and it will take care of the rest. So I have designed this to be an ever-growing toolbox of resources for any project I work on. And it will be under continuous development. So as I do new projects, maybe they have nothing to do with web servers or websites, I can still add the components to the library and use the components I've already made. This too is an open source project. Link is in the description. And again, I have tutorials on everything I've made here. So if you would like to use the library, but you're interested in learning how to make these things yourself, I would recommend checking out those videos as well. There's the plug. Anyway, As I said, the web server is in early alpha development, but it already shows some promise in a few ways. So first of all is just the stack that you end up with at the end of this. So if you're making a Flask application, for instance, when you're ready for it to go into production, you need several layers to your stack. On top of whatever operating system you're running, you'll have a web server like Apache, and then you'll have your Flask application, which is actually running the Python interpreter. The Python interpreter then interprets your code and generates whatever response it needs to. So there's a lot of layers to a Flask application. Here, there's only one layer, well, two if you include the operating system. All of the components you need, both the framework, all of the definitions for your routes, and the web server itself are compiled down into a single executable file that runs on the bare metal of your machine. So even in this early stage, with some of the light testing that I have done, it is amazingly fast. So this is a really, really efficient server, especially if you can combine that with the multi-threading that I've added to it. It's really, really quick. And also it's in C or C++, so whichever language you're more comfortable with, you can write it in that language and then compile everything you need down into a single executable file, which to me is pretty elegant, if I may say so myself. So, like I said, room to grow, but it shows some promise, and I think that will do it for now. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, I highly encourage that, and please leave it in the comments. I would love to hear any feedback you have on the project. So that'll do it for now. Thank you for watching. If you are interested in this sort of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I will see you in the future. Toodaloo.